this tool of sin, it was needed in a time in order to reinforce the power structures of an emerging religion, right? And so the moment that you say you're sinful, there is something wrong with you, because sometimes we forget how far the human can fall from grace, in the sense of forgetting who they are on a soul level. So even these figures that you're talking about, they have their place. And as long as you remember who you are and you continue to wake up to that fact, pretty soon those figures will not be necessary.
I'd like to welcome to the show Christina Lopes. How you doing, Christina?
How are you? It's good to be here, Alex.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're
I'm
welcome.
excited to talk to you. You have a pretty interesting journey to get to where you've been, where you've been and where you are right now. So
I do.
before I get to your spiritual awakening and the things that have kind of happened to you to get to where you are, what was life like prior to those events?
Well, prior to 2013, which is when I had that spiritual awakening, prior to that, I was living a pretty normal life, in the sense that I was a clinician. I'm a physical therapist by training, with a specialty in neuropediatrics. So I worked with children with disabilities. And so that was my life. I was married. I got married, bought a house, bought a car, just living a regular American life. But even in the years prior to my spiritual awakening, I knew that there was something profoundly wrong with me, in the sense that I knew there was something deep down inside of me that, trauma to heal, things that really had to be worked through. I just at the time didn't really feel like I had the tools to go that deep. And now I understand why, now after my spiritual awakening and all of the work that I've done and all of the healing work that I've done, things now make sense looking back. But at the time, I think for so many of us, especially from people that from a lot of trauma, it's really hard sometimes to be able to know the depth of the trauma that you have, and also to have the tools to deal with them, because we're not trained in our current cosmopolitan society to be able to heal trauma, to work with trauma, to do that inner voyage. It's we're not taught this in school. We should be, though.
Mhm.
And so for me, life was regular before, but I knew that I had things to work through. I was spiritual even before my spiritual awakening. I come from a long line of women healers. So my grandmother was a very powerful healer, and she taught me a lot of things throughout life about the spirit world, and how to clear energies and all of that stuff. She was known in her village as kind of the village witch. And so I bring those gifts from my mother's side. But I was really afraid of those gifts, and I was afraid of opening that door to spirituality. So I followed a clinical path. I followed a science path. And then in 2013, I decided, hey, like my brain, my mind has taken me as far as it can go, really. And now it's time to open the door to other things that are really my destiny, really my higher path, what I call now my higher path in life.
Why were you afraid to open that door?
I was afraid because I really suffered as a child. I've been very, very sensitive, spiritually attuned, very, very, since a very young age. And there was a lot of trauma. There were a lot of painful experiences going on in my childhood. My father was very, very sick. And so there was a lot of drama in the family, in the core family. There was a lot of stuff that we were going through with my father's illness. And so I was in a state of huge amount of stress, and I had these spiritual gifts. So when you have a lot of fear, when you have a lot of low vibration energies around you, you attract energies that are not always welcoming. And so I was really scared as a child. I was visited by a lot of energies. I was constantly tortured by what I now know are shadow entities or darker entities, energies that are darker.
Hmm.
And so my childhood was not particularly comfortable. My grandmother, speaking of my maternal grandmother, she was the one that, she lived in a different place. So when she would come and visit us, one of the first things I would beg her to do is do her spiritual cleansings on me. And that would work for a little while. And then I was back to feeling miserable. I suffered from a lot of anxiety that was spiritual anxiety, really, because it was energies that were interfering with my energy field. And so when you grow up feeling like you're being tortured by the other side, you don't really want to open the door as an adult. You just want to
Fair
close
enough.
it. and you want to pretend that those things don't exist, and especially when you don't have the tools to really explore. I think at the time I didn't have the tools to fully explore the extent of the gifts that I was born with. And so it was just easier. It was just easier to close the door and just try and live a normal life, but
Right.
you just can't do it. It's kind of like someone that's born with the gift of being a concert pianist. You can try not to play piano, but you're going to have a pretty miserable life if you don't dedicate yourself to the skills and to the gifts that you were born with. And I think it's the same thing with regardless of what the gift is, you know.
With the idea of the negative energies, because a lot of people deal with this, obviously.
Yeah.
What on the part of the let me rephrase. When the soul is going through its journey, why do you think that you had to go through that point, that experience in this lifetime? Because it seems pretty intense. What
Yeah.
purpose was that for your overall soul's growth in this lifetime? I'd love to
Yeah.
if you figured that even
Sure.
out.
Yeah, yeah. So today, the primary way in which I work with clients, even in healing trauma and developing their spiritual abilities, is it's really fundamentally a question of coming into your power. And that piece of understanding who you are on a soul level, understanding that you can't really be messed with unless there's some kind of belief, or unless there's some kind of fear in you, unless there's some kind of seed inside of you that sows that idea of self-doubt, the idea that you're small. And then when you pile on top of it religious indoctrination, I was raised Catholic. So anyone that comes
Oh.
from a Christian upbringing understands that, we've heard so many times that, if we open the spiritual door, or if we connect with spirit, we're going to be connecting with the devil or God knows what. And so
Mm.
if you have that religious templating on top of it, you really feel small. And I think what I felt as a child was I didn't feel protected. I felt like the spirit world was not welcoming. I felt like the spirit world was all dark. And I felt like connecting with the spirit world was something very painful. And I didn't have the experience of having the being able to interact with the spirit world on a light aspect, or at least I didn't feel it at the time. And of course, all of this was happening because there was a lot of fear, there was a lot of trauma going on in my family life. And so I was just kind of attracting to me the energies that were vibrating at the same frequency of that fear, the smallness, powerlessness. And so you really receive more of this energy interference when you are in a state of powerlessness, when you do not know who you are. The moment that you do know who you are, and one of the mantras that I use now that my clients repeat over and over, I think it's one of my favorite mantras that my clients use, is the mantra that I repeat constantly with them, and that is, there is no energy stronger than me. And this is something that I really trained in myself. I remember that even after my spiritual awakening, but before my spiritual awakening, this was very common. I've always been very sensitive. And I remember that I kind of made up certain protection or coping mechanisms. If I went to a bar, I would be looking for an exit in case I had a panic attack, AKA
Mm.
in case harsh energies started interfering with me. I would either be looking for a bathroom, or I'd be looking for an exit. And this is how I operated most of my life. I operated with the belief that the energies out there are stronger than me and that I am powerless against them. And so when I had my spiritual awakening, I resonate very strongly. I have a mixture of both stellar energy, crystalline, alien energy, if you want to call it that way, Pleiadian energy, but
Mm.
also a very strong, grounded shamanic energy. And I feel like that shamanic energy is really what got me through my spiritual awakening, because it was through what my guides continued to instill in me, that I would continue to be visited by shadows and by lower level energies as long as I believed that I was powerless in the face of that energy. And I remember actually the last time that I was ever truly bothered by a shadow energy. I used to get attacked at night. So that's usually when I was most vulnerable, was at night. So it would get to a point where I felt like I was being thrown out of bed. I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and there was an entity, a really dark, shadowy entity inside the mental plane of my aura. And it was tinkering with my thoughts. And I had been suicidal as a teenager. And so those shadow entities would always tinker with the parts of you that are most vulnerable, the parts of you that are most wounded. And I remember they would start tinkering with my thoughts. And I would start thinking things, oh, like I should just end it. I should just kill myself. What am I doing here? But I started to understand that that wasn't me. I wasn't thinking that. I was not, those thoughts weren't being provoked by me. They weren't being initiated by me. And I remember one of my guides said to me, when you have these attacks, you're calling for Jesus, for Archangel Michael, you're calling for all these different entities, for your angels to come and help you because this energy feels horrible. But maybe it's time for you to stop calling for anyone to come and rescue you. And that was really my initiation. I remember this, that was kind of the change point for me. That very night, I was visited again by a really powerful shadow entity, threw me out of bed, again, 3 o'clock in the morning, threw me out of bed. And I remember I sat at the edge of the bed and instinctively I was going to call. I've always had a really strong relationship with Master Yeshua, not the Jesus of the Bible, but the Yeshua as he existed as a master. And I've always had a really close relationship with that energy, with the energy of Mary Magdalene and with the energy of archangels. And I remember I sat in my bed, and I don't know if you've ever been bothered by shadow entities, but it's horribly uncomfortable on your body. And I remember the first thought I had was, call Yeshua, call angels. And I remembered what my guide had said, one of my guides. I have a team of guides that work with me. And I remember my guide saying, like these shadow entities are coming to help you evolve, which is kind of a controversial thing to say these days, but shadow entities really do help us evolve. They're here for push. They push us. They push and they push. And I remember thinking, no, I'm not going to call for Yeshua. I'm not going to call for anyone. And I sat at the edge of my bed and I said to the shadow entity, your presence is not welcome. Please leave. And I just opened a light portal and I sent it off. And that was the last time that I was ever truly bothered by a shadow entity. And that was a fundamental moment for me, because that moment when I didn't call for angels, I didn't call for anyone to come rescue me, I stood there and I said, this is me. I'm powerful. There's no energy stronger than me. You are not welcome. Please leave. You are not permitted to be in my presence. You are most certainly not permitted to be in my energy field. I do not permit it. I revoke permission for you to interfere with me. May you go back to the light. And today I use the mantra. I teach my students to open light portals. I always teach people, there's no war against shadow and light. There's no wars. Wars are in the human mind. And so what I teach people to do is when you feel bothered by lower level energies, you simply open a portal and you program that light portal to take whatever lower level energy back to God or back to source. And some of my students sometimes laugh at me because I say, I command this energy to go back to God to be recycled. And sometimes people sometimes laugh because it's like, but this is really how I feel, because these energies, they have been polluting this plane for a really long time. But when you really feel into your heart, these energies suffer a lot. Lower level energies, shadow energies suffer a lot because they have forgotten who they are. We are all part of source energy. We all come from the same place. And so when you open your heart and you really understand how miserable it is to be a shadow entity or to be a lower level soul that is just kind of caught in this plane and just wants to go home, you open that portal and you send that entity with love and compassion back to God. And that really changed everything for me when I learned how to do this. So now I would say it's really a place of being in your power, understanding who you are and understanding the power that you have to really heal the planet, and heal everything on this planet, not just what's seen, but what's unseen.
Well, I am too a recovering Catholic, so I understand exactly where you're coming from. There's a lot of programming that you have to deal with to get through that. Obviously, this conversation alone, we're speaking to the devil. Obviously, just even having this conversation, we're going straight to hell.
Exactly.
So, but I just wanted to dig in just a little bit into these shadow entities because it is something that is not spoken about very often, or it's spoken about incorrectly. That there's demons and there's this and there's that, and
Yeah.
And I've heard about these entities in near-death experiences, people
Hmm.
who have hellish near-death experiences that have to kind of transcend it because of their own beliefs. They go down into this hellish experience and then eventually are saved and or escape, if you will, to the light. But can you explain just a little deeper about what they are so people don't get confused and get scared? Because I mean,
Yeah.
when you're talking about, because when you hear shadow entities, first thing I thought of is those black things from Ghost, the things
Hmm.
that come out of the shadows and they pull your soul down or something like that. That was the
Yeah.
very first thing that I thought of when I heard that for the first time. I'm like, shadow entity, like, oh yeah. And with the sound effects and everything. I mean, it's Hollywood.
Yeah.
But can you explain to people so they have to understand what it is and how to deal with it in their own life, but what they are, where they come from.
Yeah. So everything comes from the same place. There's only one source. There's only one creator. There's only one. That's the basis of all of reality. But there's also involved in that oneness, there's also a evolutionary path, and an evolutionary path that many times involves separation from that source, or the illusion of separation from that source. So it's almost like, God, creator, whatever word you want to use that's most comfortable for you, the universe, that oneness, the Big Bang, some people call it. There's a lot of freedom in that, and there's unconditional love, and unconditional love says you can go on your path, whatever that path is. I love you the same way. And that's how I see source energy. Source energy says go forth from me, and you are free to evolve, to explore, and to experience reality or realities however you feel, because you are free and I love you unconditionally. And so if you think about it that way, you can start to understand the diversity that exists in the spirit world is the same diversity that exists in human form. There's so many different aspects of us. There's so much diversity down here, and there is so in the spirit world also. So when you're connecting on the light side, we're used to diversity on the light side. There are angels, there are archangels, there are guides, there are ancestors that we call on. There are various spirit guides that have so much diversity in them. An archangel is very different from an angel. An elemental, a guide of nature, looks very different than a Yeshua or a Mary Magdalene, ascended masters that have disincarnated. So we know about the diversity when it comes to the light aspect, and we're comfortable with that diversity. But on the dark aspect, there's also diversity. And so I call shadow entities anything that is vibrating at a fundamentally lower level than my inherent soul vibration. And these are entities, our energy, that make us feel very uncomfortable because they don't know how to interact with us through love. They interact with us through fear. That's their food. That's how they feed. They feed off of fear. So when you are in a low level, not just fear, but every variation of those lower level spectrum emotions, once that entity feeds off of that, you're not going to feel love from them. But you're not going to feel love not because they are some aberration that's not under the control of creator. You're not going to feel love because these energies have experienced so much vastness away from the energy that they come from, that they have forgotten who they are. And a saying, I still retain a lot of sayings from the Bible, but if that moment when Christ is crucified and he looks down at the Roman soldiers and he says, God forgive them for they know not, Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. This is a perfect description of shadow energy. It really is. They have forgotten who they are. And then of course we have layered, religion. We have Hollywood movies that come in, and the exorcism and all of these different things. And it makes people afraid of this diversity on the shadow aspect or on the dark aspect. But we don't have to be afraid when you really think about the fact that these energies, they are only doing what they know how to do. But if we really step into our power, there is no shadow energy that can ever interfere with you ever again. And one of my guides was really, there's this beautiful team of guys. Thank God they were really helping me in my spiritual awakening, because I had a really intense initiation when I first had a spiritual awakening. And my energy system opened up completely, and I felt like I was being assaulted by everything on every side. So thankfully, I was able to channel the guidance of these beautiful guides. And they just guide, I talk a lot about this in my second book, the guidance that I received throughout those initiation years. And one of the beautiful things that one of my guides said to me was that there is no war between light and dark, that everything is evolving toward love, and that at this moment, what we are doing and how we can help shadow entities, how we can help the dark move into the light, is by providing a lot of love and understanding and compassion. And the example that one of my guides gave me was about a lion in the Serengeti, and she talks about how a lion is used to feeding off of meat. You're not going to see a lion go into a pond fishing because the lion is just used to doing something. But if that meat disappears, the lion is going to have to be resourceful in changing the way that they feed themselves, the way that they nourish themselves. And it's the same thing with shadow energies. The moment that fear, that shame, that guilt, that rage starts to disappear from the planet, these shadow energies will evolve into the light and into love, because that's the only path of evolution. There's no way around. There's no going back. And so we're all moving more towards the light and more towards the love, not just light beings, but dark beings also. It's inevitable, but there's a little bit of chaos being created on the planet while we're moving towards that light, because shadow energy is going to continue to doing what it does best, which is interfere. It's going to amplify your more dense emotions. It's going to incentivize you to do things that are not of love. But this is changing, and this is going to change. And eventually there will be no more darkness. There will be no shadow realm. We're all going towards the light. And that's, it's a beautiful way of seeing things that is so different from the religious upbringing that I had. And it's so different from the disempowered way in which we are taught in society when to confront evil or to confront darkness, right? It's a completely different way, but it's a way that feels right to me. It's a way that feels righteous to me, and it's a way that feels more in alignment with the creator of all. When I really go back to the origin of it, if we all come from the same place, then all the demons of the world are also as loved by God as any light being is, or as any one of us is. And that I feel like that is a much more empowering and loving way of looking at the diversity in the spirit realm, in the same way that we can look at the diversity of people and beings on the planet.
That is a beautiful way of looking at it, and you're absolutely right. I mean, everything comes from source, regardless of if they've gone astray or not from their path.
Yeah.
Which then rolls me into this next question in regards to what's going on the planet today.
Mm.
There's a lot of talk that, things are insane. This has never been as bad as it's been now. That's not true at all. In my opinion, that's not true at all. It's been much worse. It's been much worse. We've had much harder lives on this planet than we have right now, as a complete species. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But right now, there seems to be a tremendous amount of chaos, even more so, even in my lifetime, from the 70s to where we are right now. Seems to be a different kind of chaos. I mean, I
Yeah.
was raised under the Cold War. So, at any moment, like, oh, any day now, you watch that movie The Day After, and you're like, oh, good Lord, we're all going to die at any second. So it was under that kind of constant fear. It's different now, but there seems
Yeah.
to be a lot crazier. It seems to be a lot more chaotic, from wars going on to the politics, to the economies, to every major institution, medical, religious, all this. There just seems to be chaos everywhere. A Catholic Church, for God's sakes, that seems to be a little shaky. Not nearly as all powerful as it was when you and I were children.
Mhm.
When you and I were children,
Yeah.
they could do no wrong. It was the Catholic Church, right?
Yep.
Now, a couple of bricks have shaken out. But what is your feeling on what is happening today with a lot of the negativity, a lot of the old energies of like wars that are going on? And to be honest, people who are on the global stage, who are really affecting, billions, definitely millions, but some of them billions of other people, because of their really kind of low low energy. So
Yeah.
there's that aspect of it, but then there's also seems to be a lot of light going on as well, because you and I
Yeah.
are having a conversation like this in a very public forum, and our audiences are growing. So there seems to be
Mhm.
more wanting for this. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what's going on.
So I think the fundamental change, there are multiple things going on at the same time. It's not simple, but one of the core things happening and that a lot of people forget is that we are on top of a sentient rock barreling through space at 70,000 miles an hour. And that this beautiful planet, she is sentient. And so, in the same way that we are each evolving, so is the planet that we call home, that we're literally, our bodies are nourished by this planet and kept alive by this planet. And so, if her energy ascends, our energy must ascend with her. We cannot stay on this planet. The vibrations will be off too much. And so, some of the chaos that's happening on the planet right now, particularly after the COVID pandemic, the pandemic was really a turning point for the vibration of the planet. And I've talked about this a lot, and that symbolism, that archetypal symbolism, that where we were all forced to quarantine, the planet herself, while we were all at home, she was changing, and she was changing really fast. And when we opened our doors to come out of quarantine, we were no longer standing on the same planet from an energetic perspective. There was a huge shift in energy. And that energy was very, very quick. So after the COVID pandemic, we stepped out of our doors, and suddenly we're stepping on a land that no longer has the same energy it did before. And that new energy is starting to trickle up our feet, up our legs, into our energy system. And one of the things that higher level energy does is it starts to shake. So the example that I like to give is, if you think about a water tank that's been sitting for, let's say, a year. You have a tank full of water and it's been sitting for a year motionless. You look at the water and it may look like it's crystal clear, but all you have to do is just go to the tank and shake it, and suddenly all of the sediment comes up. Everything that was unseen comes up. And that's essentially what's happening inside of each and every one of us. This new vibration on the planet is shaking us, and it's really forcing us to have deep, deep existential conversations with ourselves. Am I happy? Am I happy in this relationship? Am I happy at my job? Am I happy at life? What am I doing with my life? And it doesn't even have to be in a deeply spiritual questions. There are a lot of people going through awakenings. Millions upon millions of people are going through spiritual awakenings. But many of us are going through awakenings that they wouldn't even call spiritual. They're just an existential crisis. Something is shaking inside of them. When all of that shakes, if you do not have the spiritual and emotional maturity to be able to work through the material that's coming to the surface, you're just going around and you're just going to want to punch people in the face.
Which is
You're going to
literally
want to
happening in New York. It's literally happening in
literally.
New York.
Yeah, what I'm saying is it's not an over the top example. These things are literally happening. Road rages, people screaming at you, and then out of nowhere, people having just like rage attacks. This is happening, but these are people that are having their tank shaken by the energy of Mother Gaia. And they do not have the emotional or the spiritual understanding or the tools to work through all of the emotional baggage, all of the past trauma, all of the past experiences, all of the ancestral energy, everything that they have been carrying for generations, that they carry in their bodies, is coming up to be seen and to be healed. And imagine just that. If we just talk about this aspect, imagine how chaotic the world is, right? All of this stuff is coming to the surface. I'm feeling angry. Why am I angry? I have no idea why I'm angry. No idea. I don't know how to work with my emotions. Nobody's ever taught me to work with my emotions. So I'm just going to get angry and I'm going to want to punch someone. And then here comes the shadow entities. Shadow entities amplify the worst in us. And so the shadow entities come and they're like, oh, look at that guy. He's really angry. Let's go stick on top of him and feed off of that energy. And what ends up happening is the anger amplifies and the anger amplifies. And then eventually I'm going to kill someone or I'm going to punch someone in the face because the energy has been so amplified, right? So that's one slice of what's happening. Another way of talking about this too is that the planet, as she is ascending, there's split in timelines, which I'm sure you've talked about on your show before too. There's this 3D timeline, which is basically the continuation of separation consciousness. These are the people that are here that are so stuck in their ego that they're not waking up They're not waking up. They're just, hey, my life is just about making money and being successful. And it doesn't matter if I have to pillage the earth to do that. I don't care about the earth. I don't care about anything except making money. Me versus you. Let's go to war. This is all 3D timeline, but there's a very powerful 5D timeline coming in, and a lot of us are jumping on that boat, on that 5D boat, and these timelines are splitting, and they are becoming more evident every single day. And so if you just think about this from that perspective, Mother Earth, guess what timeline she's getting on? She's not getting on the 3D timeline, and she is not allowing the 3D timeline to perpetuate on top of her. So you've got Mother Gaia and you've got millions of souls that are awakening, and we're going on this 5D timeline. We're starting to wake up and we're starting to say, wait a minute, I'm not powerless. I don't care what my religion has told me. I am not powerless. I am not small. I am a sovereign being with a lot of power. And I'm going to work on myself, and I'm going to access levels of myself that I've never accessed before. I'm going to grow. And so we're going on this 5D timeline. And the biggest chaos that you're seeing right now is in the 3D timeline because it's falling out. But these things sometimes are hard to die. And so when we talk about 3D timelines, we're talking about everything. We're talking about separation consciousness in medicine, separation consciousness in government, separation consciousness in our oldest institutions, in religion. We're talking about every single corner of the planet where power and corruption and greed have kind of filtered into. Those things are crumbling, and they're crumbling right in front of our eyes. Everybody can see it. So even the people that you were talking about a little while ago, you were saying that it seems like the people with the lowest vibrations are the ones that are running countries or ruling the world or whatever. I believe that there's a purpose to that. There's a purpose because we as human beings, we evolve through the contrast of mirrors. And so sometimes we need to see a really painful mirror. We need to be pushed to the extremes of polarization in order to decide inside of us, I don't want that. I don't want that. No more. And so sometimes these leaders that are lower vibration, they end up popping up on civilization to show us things that we do not want to repeat. Hitler being a perfect example of one such figure that pops up and shows us the worst that exists inside of us. And that was embodied by this figure, by this person. After this person exited the planet, we still have memory of how far down we can go in terms of separation consciousness. And so it's important for us to have these examples. It's important for us to hold these images in our minds, because sometimes we forget how far the human can fall from grace, in the sense of forgetting who they are on a soul level. So even these figures that you're talking about, they have their place. And as long as you remember who you are and you continue to wake up to that fact, pretty soon those figures will not be necessary. And we will be led by people that are also of the light, by people that are also light beings, by people that are also doing the inner work, right? But that shift is going to happen when there's a threshold of enough people that are doing their own inner work. And we're still going towards that. We're still working on that, right? I would say there are millions of people truly awakening and doing the inner work that's necessary to get into a 5D timeline, but there are 7.5 billion people on the planet. So we still need a little bit more of awakening souls before that threshold can be met, and we tip the scale into the 5D reality.
So let's talk about your spiritual awakening. Can you explain exactly what happened during your awakening?
Yeah. So I think my awakening is very similar to a lot of wounded healer paths. And to a lot of people that awaken, really. I've worked with thousands of clients, and a lot of us have the same story, which is I was living a regular life, and then something dramatic happened. And in that dramatic situation, my ego broke, and I decided, wow, this ego has really been manifesting crap after crap in my life, and I'm tired of letting my ego lead.
If you're enjoying this conversation, I invite you to go deeper down the rabbit hole with me on Next Level Soul TV. It's packed with exclusive content like live special guest Q&As, daily podcasts, commercial-free access to the entire Next Level Soul catalog, early access to episodes before they air, and special meditations you won't find anywhere else. We will be adding new exclusive content every month. Plus, you can connect with me during my monthly live streams. Just go to nextlevelsoul.com/subscribe and join our soulful community today. I'll see you on the inside.
My mind has reached its limit. There's a limit to my mind, even though it thinks it knows everything. And now I am going to explore the part of me that is more powerful, that is connected to source, and that has a higher vision of my life. And that's what happened to me. I was living a regular life. My marriage ended very, very abruptly. And these things tend to happen in my life. I'm a double Sagittarius, so I have a lot of fire energy. So when my soul says, okay, it's time to change your path, it's not a soft thing. It's just like, hey, your wife is going to get home and she's going to ask for a divorce out of nowhere. That's literally what's going to happen to you. And so this is what happened to me. And I remember that I've been through a lot of trauma in my life. And so when I got to that point and that happened to me, there was a part of me that felt so much, of course, so much loss, so much grief, so many things were happening in that moment. I was finishing a very demanding degree at Johns Hopkins. I was a physical therapist, but then I went back to school. I also have a master's of public health from Johns Hopkins, which is the top public health institution in the world. And so I was going through a really rigorous master's degree at the time that my marriage fell apart. I was just starting my master's thesis. And so it was just absolute chaos. To this day, I don't even know how I made it through that degree, but I did make it and I did graduate. But it was a really, really difficult period in my life. And although I was feeling all of this grief and I was feeling like, my life is literally falling apart, there was also another part of me, my soul, that I could hear very clearly that said, no, there's a purpose to this. And I know there's a purpose to this and something is opening up. And I opened that door. That's really when I opened my door. When I opened that door, I remember I was lying on my bed. I had my beautiful Great Dane in bed with me. And, my marriage had just fallen apart. And I remember I looked up, I was in the darkness and I just looked up to the ceiling and I said, my life has not been working out really well this way. I am ready now to open the door to spirit. I'm ready. I'm ready. Just come and get me. Do what you all want to do with me. I'm ready. I'm ready for this path. And that invitation, I think, is everything. When you invite spirit into your life, holy moly, you like everything changes. And so that open-ended invitation, please open this door and show me what my path is, what my highest path is, what my soul path is. I know I'm on this planet to follow that soul path, and I'm tired of playing around. And that was basically the energy. I'm tired of playing around. I'm ready for my highest soul path, because there are various soul paths, right? Like your soul is non-judgmental. So when you come down here, you forget, you have that veil of forgetfulness. You forget where you come from. You forget who you are. And so your soul allows for your human avatar to go down this road and go down that road and go down the other road. But there is a highest path. That's the path that your soul prefers for this lifetime. And there comes a point in your road where your soul will pull you towards that highest path, sometimes against your human avatar's will. and that's, I don't know if that's ever happened to you, Alex, where it's like, there comes a point, does this happen to you where it seems like through part of our lives, we were just doing crap after crap after crap. And the soul was like, you go ahead, you just keep doing that. No problem. I'm not going to interfere. But then there comes a point where your soul's like, all right, enough horsing around. This is it. You're not doing, nope, you are going down this path. This is your path, and that's it. And I'm not going to hear any more of it. So has this happened to you?
Many times.
Yeah.
Especially in my 20s, 30s, and even 40s.
Yeah.
So yes, absolutely.
And so that was the moment that I said, okay, I will follow my soul. I will follow my soul. And I will turn this human avatar, this mind, this meat suit of mine, I will teach it to follow my soul. I will heal this human avatar to the greatest extent possible so that the vibration of my soul can enter my body fully and I can connect with that highest path that my soul set out for me. And that's basically been my intention since 2013, really.
So there wasn't like, Yeshua didn't show up and go, okay, Christina, it's time.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything
Yes,
like that. There was,
he didn't. He did.
Buddha's in the corner.
Yeah, Yeshua did show up because he was actually the first guide that I asked for. So when I was lying on that bed, I opened that door. I remember it was the first guide that he's one of my greatest masters. And he was with me for a really long time, the master that I always called on in the initial years of my awakening. And I remember that was the first time that I ever had an astral projection, what would be considered an astral projection. I didn't know what that was at the time. But I remember I was lying on the bed and I said, okay, I'm opening this door. Please come and get me. And it was Yeshua that came and get me. It was the first experience I had of having an out of body experience. And that was the trigger of my spiritual awakening, followed by multiple years of a lot of difficulties. I really do have that wounded healer's path, a very shamanic path, of having to go down to the depths of my own underworld, face all of my demons, turn over every rock of my inner world so that I could bring love and light to it, and in that way ascend my vibration, then help guide others through their own underworlds, which is what I do now.
It seems that, Yeshua's teachings, true teachings, are making a comeback, if you will, where it's starting to be dislodged from religion and dogma and fear. And it's starting to come up. People are saying Yeshua now, not just Jesus, and are pulling away from the ideas that the Catholic Church put out and other sects put out of his teachings. And his true teachings seem to be coming back more, where people are going, I gotta separate Yeshua from this institution of fear and dogma, and other things that he never meant. Like I've said this on the show many times. I was blessed to be able to go to Italy, and I went to visit Vatican City. And when I went to the Vatican, I just, so I don't know if you've been or not, but when you walk around,
No.
I'm like, this has nothing to do with Jesus. It's nothing to do with him, his teachings, not like absolutely nothing. It was pretty eye-opening to me. I was like, oh, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on where his teachings are going and why people are starting to reach out and look for his ideas in a more clean, non heavy way.
Yeah. Well, Yeshua's teachings, I always say his name was Yeshua ben Joseph. And I like to say his actual real name because to me that connects to the purity of his energy as a master. And his teachings were absolutely revolutionary for the time. He literally, I mean, they were revolutionary because they were anti-institutional. They were anti-religious in many ways. He was known to confront Jewish high priests. He was known to confront authority. He was known to confront power.
Troublemaker.
And so his teachings were absolutely revolutionary. But you also have to think about the master that exists within the collective consciousness of the time, right? So we're talking about a time of immense turmoil. We're talking about a time of immense power struggles, wars. If we think the energy is dense right now, talk about when Yeshua was alive. It was horribly violent. It was just chaos. And so if you imagine that this great master comes, this great master is anti-religious, anti-institutional. This great master is talking about how the kingdom of heaven is inside of you. This is revolutionary because this master is saying, you don't need an intermediary. You don't need anyone else talking to God for you. You have a direct connection. You are a child of that source. You don't need any intermediaries. You have power. You have sovereignty. You are an eternal being. The kingdom that you are seeking is inside of you. This is his fundamental message. This is revolutionary for the time, and too revolutionary for power structures that wanted to control and oppress people. And so if you grab Yeshua's original teachings, you can understand that there was no way that these original teachings could survive at the time because of where we were collectively. So Yeshua came down and he planted a seed, and he's planted a seed that's taken thousands of years to develop, but he planted a seed at the right time. It takes many, many, many generations for us to change collective consciousness. That's just how humans operate in this plane. And so he came down, he planted the seed, and he said, he whispered in our ears, you do not need a church, you do not need a temple, you do not need anything to connect to your creator. Your creator is within you. You come from that energy, and you can have a conversation with that energy directly. This is very, very jarring for structures that want to control and oppress a certain level of the population. And so in comes this religious movement that says it is speaking for this master, yet it does everything opposite of what the master taught. It's a system of controlling. It's a system of instilling fear. It's a system of instilling an intermediary. So now suddenly I can't talk to God directly. I have to go to a priest, and I have to confess to a priest. And then a priest tells me what God is saying. What? No, 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 no. And so all of these things start to happen. These are all forms of control. And if you look around the world, I love to visit Catholic sites, but I love to visit Catholic sites not because of the energy of the building that was built on top on that site, but because Catholic sites, some of the holiest Catholic sites on earth, were constructed on top of previously existing powerful energy spots on the planet, usually pagan in nature or non-Christian. They would go in, they would pillage everything that was non-Christian, and then they would build their churches on top of these sacred spots. So yeah, you can go into a church and it's so powerful, but it's really powerful because it was built on sacred land that had been existing for thousands of years prior to these institutions coming in. And so the Catholic Church had its time, not just the Catholic Church, any institution that involves having power over others is dissolving. It's not just the Catholic Church, but any institution, really. And so now what's happening is we are now embodying the teachings of Yeshua. The kingdom of heaven is within me. I am a sovereign being. I make decisions for myself. I am powerful. I do not need an intermediary to connect to my source. And so it's like we are reviving. We are coming into that Christ energy, but Christ energy not in a religious sense, Christ energy almost like Buddha energy, where you're connecting to the teachings of the master more in its purity, but it's because we're ready now, because we're waking up. It's really hard, right? Like we wouldn't have been ready to truly listen to the revolutionary teachings of Yeshua 20, 30 years ago, because we ourselves were in a disempowered state. You can't hear Yeshua's messages if you feel powerless. You can't hear it if you think you are small, if you think you don't matter, if you think you have no way of changing the world or yourself. The Yeshua's messages just go right over your head. You can't hear. So what you're going to end up hearing is a distorted interpretation of Yeshua's teachings through a pastor, through a priest. And then you're going to absorb that and you're going to think that's true. And then you're going to be stuck because it's not true. And so now I feel like there's a revival, not just of Yeshua's teachings, but also really important, what was his wife and sacred partner, Mary Magdalene. You cannot talk about Yeshua without talking about his wife that has been denied.
What? Stop. You
can't. You cannot talk.
How dare you? He was not married. That's impossible.
Exactly. What? A Jewish man married to a woman? What? How is this?
And to her, no less. Wasn't she the town hoe? I mean,
exactly.
Isn't it amazing?
All complete lies, right?
You hear these stories, and it's so. I mean, you start going into the historical facts, and you go, "Well, he was a Jewish man in that time period. He would be married. He wouldn't have just walked around as a bachelor with the 12 other dudes. Like he's not. There.
Well, not to mention Not to mention even the details are even within the New Testament. It's like they tried very, very, very hard to erase Mary Magdalene from the historical records, but she can't be erased. And so you have to start, even if you are a Christian and you just follow the New Testament. Let's not even talk about how the New Testament was formed, because that's a really long conversation. But let's
Council of
say,
Nicaea. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Let's just say that you absolutely believe that the New Testament was handed down right from God and written, and that's the law.
Yeah.
Even if you believe that, within the New Testament, there are plenty of details of who Mary Magdalene was. Mary Magdalene was the woman standing at the foot of the cross when he was dying. A prostitute would not, that she was not a prostitute. The idea that she was a prostitute wasn't even invented. It's not in the New Testament. It was invented by a pope centuries later. But that's a whole other conversation. She was not a prostitute. She was present at the foot of the cross. She was the first person to witness Yeshua's resurrection, which Egyptian alchemy would call, she saw his Ka body. I don't know if you've talked a lot about Egyptian alchemy on your show.
I am not.
But he appeared to Mary Magdalene before any of his disciples. This is telling. Why would he appear to a random woman before his most trusted disciples, including the one that would then come to found the Catholic Church? The information is contained in the New Testament if you just see it with different eyes, and if you start thinking for yourself and not from the interpretations of pastors and priests, you will start to see that the truth is already there. So, and that information is coming back also. You cannot talk about Yeshua without talking about his wife, because his wife was fundamental in him being able to fulfill his mission on earth. And part of the reason why she was erased was, all of these patriarchal models that then took over and repressed women for thousands of years. And so the rise of that feminine energy that it could be in a woman or in a man, the rise of that feminine energy, because feminine energy is not gendered, masculine energy isn't gendered, but there's a rise of that feminine in all of us that's being asked to be recognized, and it's been banished for thousands of years. And so now we are recognizing that energy, and we're recognizing it a lot through even the bringing back the knowledge, bringing back the truth that he had a wife and that she was fundamental, that she was a very, very powerful spiritual teacher that went to the south of France after his death and literally converted the entire south of France in a short amount of time. I've been to the south of France, and it's absolutely incredible, the veneration that they have for Mary Magdalene. You don't hear about these things a lot, but if you go to the south of France, you certainly know who Mary Magdalene was, and you know her story. And so all of these things are starting to come up because this knowledge, this truth was concealed for a long time, but it is not concealed anymore. And part of the reason why that's happening is because we are awakening to our power. We are awakening to our own discernment. We're not taking, I don't want to swear on your show, but we're not believing BS. We're not believing the BS that we've been fed for a long time. We used to believe BS. Oh, look, this authority figure up here is telling me something. It must be true. No, I don't accept that anymore. I don't care if it's authority figure. I don't care if it's the Pope. I don't care if it's the President of the United States. I don't care if it's a king or a queen. I am going to experience truth inside of me, and I will be able to discern what is right for me. And that's what's happening on the planet. And that's why the teachings of Yeshua are coming back.
Now, another thing about Yeshua and Christians in general, they seem to be obsessed with sin. It is an obsession with Catholics, with Christians, of this sin or that sin, and dissolving sin, original sin. I mean, it's everywhere. But yet, Yeshua never really spoke about sin. It's not a thing that he was like talking about all the time. I forgot. I think he mentioned, yeah, he who has never sinned, throw the first stone. I think that's one of the few mentions of him talking about sin and judgment in that way. Can you kind of delve in a little bit to this obsession of sin and how it's kind of polluted Yeshua's teachings?
Yeah. So if you think about it, it's really simple how sin comes in. Sin comes in as a tool of control. That's really it. Sin comes in as a tool of control being used to retain power. Sin, the way that Yeshua talked about it, and you can learn about the teachings of Yeshua also in the Gnostic Gospels a lot. But sin is, in the way Yeshua talked about it, sin simply meant I do something from my forgetfulness. So I do something from my ego. I do something from separation consciousness. And if I do something from separation consciousness, it's bound to cause pain. It's bound to cause hurt because I am operating, I am behaving outside of my soul truth. I am behaving from a place where I have forgotten who I am and where I come from. That's what sin meant for Yeshua. The word sin was then used as a tool of control because I cannot control someone unless I have something on them, right? Like I have to have something on you, right? Like it's, if you think about, someone that's blackmailing another person, how are they blackmailing another person? Because they've got juicy information that that person doesn't want the world to know. And so that's what a blackmail is. I'm going to threaten you. Sin being used by authorities is the same thing. There's this belief that is instilled in us from when we are born. I mean, imagine how horribly traumatizing it is to instill in a newborn child that they have sin, meaning
Original
that they are
sin.
not good enough. They're not good enough as they are. That they come out of their mother's womb with something wrong with them. This is horribly traumatizing. And so we traumatize our children. We've been traumatizing entire societies, making them believe that they are not good enough, that there is something wrong, fundamentally wrong with them, and they need to go to church every Sunday to fix what's wrong with them.
You need
they
Jesus.
Need to go to church.
You need
yeah,
Jesus.
exactly. I mean, but it could be Jesus or it could be any other religion. Christianity is not the only religion that uses the idea of sin in order to control
people,
right? And so this tool of sin, it was needed in a time in order to reinforce the power structures of an emerging religion, right? And so the moment that you say, you're sinful, there is something wrong with you, come to Jesus, come to this church. Oh, and look, here's the basket, give your money and all of your possessions and you will be delivered. People are starting to see this BS. There has never been anything wrong with you. There is absolutely no such thing as original sin. You were born of love. You were born perfect from your creator. You were born out of your beautiful mother's womb with absolutely nothing wrong with you. And if you still have these templates today, if you were brought up religious or even non-religious, because this belief in sin has permeated every level of our society, even in people who consider themselves atheists. They are still templated to believe that there's something wrong with them, and they always have to be chasing something. You've got to be chasing something because you're not good enough. There's something wrong with you. So this idea of sin is so pervasive that it has penetrated literally every inch of our society, even in areas that are non-religious. And so we need to be delivered from this, and we're going to be delivered from this through ourselves by no longer accepting this BS as true, And so sin to me was very simply just an instrument of control. But if you follow Yeshua's teachings, if you go back to the purity of his teachings, I don't need an intermediary. And if I have done anything, if I have acted in a way that has been hurtful towards someone because I acted in a way through my forgetfulness, I acted through my ego, that conversation is between me and my source and between me and the person that I have harmed or that I have hurt. You see, still, I don't need a priest. I don't need to go to church. I don't need to give my fortune to the church. I don't need to give all my life savings to the church. The conversation is between me and my source. I am very sorry that I hurt that person. I have behaved from a place of forgetfulness. But you see, this conversation is different. I'm sorry that I hurt that person because I've behaved from a place of forgetfulness is very different from, oh my God, I hurt that person. There's something wrong with me. I'm a horrible human being. I'm a piece of crap. You see, very different conversation. Inherent in me understanding that maybe I have sinned in the sense that I have behaved in a way that's hurtful through my forgetfulness. I'm having a conversation that I beg forgiveness. I ask for forgiveness. I say I'm sorry. I have no problem saying I'm sorry, and I have no problem going and working on amending that, but always from a position that there's nothing fundamentally wrong with me and my value has not been touched, whether I sin or not. That's powerful when you really when you take that in and when you understand sin in that way.
Now, one of my other favorite things to talk about the dogma of the Catholic religion is hell. I absolutely love talking about hell. I think it's fascinating. And my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that there is no hell in the Old Testament. That was not a concept. It's not in the Torah. Judaism did not create it at all. It's a New Testament situation. And from my understanding, it was a misinterpretation of not a lecture, but a sermon that Jesus gave, saying that there was a lake where they threw the garbage in and they burned the garbage in that lake. And if you don't get your act together, you're going to go over there and burn, or something along those lines. And they took that either in the Council of Nicaea or wherever, and they said, hell, ooh, that's a good job. Oh, yeah. Hey, how about that fallen angel thing? Let's throw that in there too. That'll be a nice little mix. And okay, great, great. Yeah, yeah, we'll do that. And then Dante showed up and they're like, yeah, this Dante thing, ooh, we could take some of this imagery and like mix it in. And the concept of hell that we have is truly a mixture of the original stories that we're just talking about and Dante, because there is no 7 levels of hell in the Bible or any of that stuff. That's a Dante thing. From what I understand, also, Dante's not about hell. It's about it's not even about hell. It's an interpretation, as a metaphor for it, but they took it as an inferno and in hell and all that stuff. I'd love to hear your point of view on this.
So hell to me is also another piece of the puzzle of control, right? I use the word sin, and I've got to have a destination, right? If I'm trying to control the masses, I have to have a destination. I have to have a consequence for when a person misbehaves or when the person does the wrong thing. If there's no consequence, if the person sins and they go right back to source when they die, then what's the point? People are going to be like, what's the point of me following your advice, rabbi or priest or imam or whatever? What's the point? Why should I listen to you if in the end, when I die, I'm just going back to God, I'm going back to source, because there's only one place to go. So why should I listen to you? So there has to be a consequence added to that in order to put fire under a person's feet so they can do exactly what power structures wanted them to do, right? And so that's where the concept of hell comes in. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. Hell does exist, but it exists in a completely different way of what the interpretations were. To me, hell is a state of consciousness that one resides in, right? So you can create your own hell. It's not up there. It's not over there. It's right here. Like you can create your hell on earth. We are creating little hells on earth right now when we're bombing countries, when we're killing children, when we're just doing obscenities on this planet. To me, that's hell. That is literally hell. You don't have to die and go to hell. Hell is happening in pockets of this world right now. And hell happens inside of many people's heads and inside of their hearts. Hell happens when someone wants to murder someone else, when someone hates someone else, when someone has envy of someone else. That's hell to me, because you are vibrating in a fundamentally different state of consciousness than your source and your soul. And anytime you depart from how your soul and how God sees things, you're in a state of hell. The more that you depart from how your soul sees, the more hellish your life becomes. And so hell to me exists, but it exists at a state of consciousness that is really, really lower level, painful, where a lot of suffering occurs. So that's how I see hell. But hell, of course, is a place that was formed through interpretation. And I have a lot of compassion. I know that sometimes we dish on people that lived thousands of years ago and they were interpreting certain things. But you have to remember that people that lived 2,000, 3,000 years ago, they were interpreting or trying to interpret. And I have no doubt that a lot of these people, and I'm going to say a lot of men, because it was mostly men in power structures at that time, they were interpreting Yeshua's teachings, or they were interpreting any spiritual teaching at the time through the lens of their beliefs, of their religion, of their society, through the beliefs of gender. They were interpreting everything through all of these lenses. And so you're trying to interpret something that's pure, but then as soon as that purity passes through the various human lenses that you have, the interpretation comes out distorted. Of course it comes out distorted, right? So I don't hate or, dish all these
Sure.
people that tried to interpret, like they interpreted the teachings of Yeshua the best that they could at the level of consciousness that they were at 2,000 years ago. But we're in a different level of consciousness now. And we can now reinterpret Yeshua's teachings. We can reinterpret old spiritual traditions of truth that was already on this planet through the lens of a more purified lens, right? A more ascended lens that we are in now.
I have to ask you, another one of my favorite topics when it comes to Yeshua is the yada, yada, yada. Now, there's a yada, yada, yada in Jeshua's story. He is born at 13. There's a story in the Bible, yada, yada, yada. I show up on a donkey at 30. The yada, yada, yada is my fascination. I've studied and looked into what that time period happened. And even when I was a kid, I asked the nuns this at my Catholic school, and they're like, stop asking questions. And I'm like, okay, this seems to be suspect if I can't even ask a question about this. They just blank out this time period. I'm like, what was teenage Jesus or, Yeshua like? Was he a troublemaker? Was he dating? Like, I was just curious, like what he was doing at that time. To my understanding that there is, and I want to hear what I'm sure you've gone down this road. I'm sure you have. To my understanding, he was trained. He did travel. He went to Tibet. He went to India. He went to the mystery schools in Egypt. There is some sort of historical proof of these things, in one way, shape, or form in the archaeology of things, from my understanding. I'd love to hear what you think, because I've always looked at you as soon as I started going down the yogic path, and studying those masters like Yogananda or Babaji or these lineages in the East. I just started looking back at Yeshua. I'm like, oh, he's a yogi. Yeshua is a great yogi, because a lot of the miracles in the Bible, those are yogic powers that they've been talking about in the East forever. And in the East, he's revered. I mean, in India, he is revered as a great and powerful yogi, a very ascended master in the East. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about this.
Again, it's very interesting and telling that Yeshua disappears from historical evidence for the formative years of his life. If you look at what the agenda was behind that, Yeshua was meant to be this pure vessel, the only Son of God, right?
Of course.
And so you have to maintain the image of purity. He was born that way. He was born all knowing. He was just born this way. This is not true. Yeshua was an ascended master. He was extremely gifted as a child. Of course he was. We have written record of him being, challenging Jewish high priests when he was a child, right? So we know that. But then when he disappears, he's doing what all ascended masters do on their path and journey in life. He was learning. This is a word that Catholics and Christians and the power structures of Christianity hate to give to Jesus, because supposedly this is the only Son of God. This is the Savior. He doesn't need to learn anything. Yes, he does. And he learns a lot in those formative years. Like you said, he was in India. He went to Egypt. Tom Kenyon does a great job. I don't know if you've ever read Tom Kenyon's the Magdalene manuscript, I think it's called. It's one of Tom Kenyon's books. Tom Kenyon talks a lot about Egyptian alchemy, and talking about how Yeshua was trained in Egyptian alchemy in the Egyptian schools. Yeshua went to places where there was traditionally enormous amount of spiritual knowledge, and he learned from those traditions. Yeshua is also famed to have gone, I don't know if you've ever been to Glastonbury, but I loved going to Glastonbury. I loved tapping into the energy of Avalon. Within folkloric tradition in Glastonbury is the idea that Yeshua traveled more than once to Glastonbury with his uncle Joseph of Arimathea, who was a very, very wealthy merchant. So this idea of Yeshua coming from a poor family is thrown out the window if you really start to study the master. He also studied with the Essenes. I don't know if you mentioned that already, but the Essenes were very, very they were relegated. They weren't part of regular society. And the Essenes did have some funky customs, but the Essenes were also esteemed spiritual leaders, and he studied with Essenes. Some of his teachings coincide with the teachings of Essenes. And so Yeshua went around the world. He traveled. He was not poor. He came from very, very spiritual and powerful people, especially on his mother's line. His mother also studied in the temples of Egypt. His grandmother, Anna, was a very, very powerful woman. And so if you really study Yeshua, the man, you realize that he was an extraordinary master, but he was an extraordinary master that also learned, and he learned from many traditions, and he learned from the spiritual traditions that came before him. And then he interpreted those traditions, he embodied those traditions, and then he taught a version of those traditions in the same way that Buddha did. You know, Buddha was a prince. He walked out of his castle. He had to learn what poverty was. He had to learn what famine was. He had to learn what death was. He learned, and he only became enlightened after learning. You see? And so Yeshua went through the same path. And this doesn't denigrate his path. It makes it more beautiful because it makes it more human. He was a human, contrary to what Christian power structures want you to believe. He was a very, very powerful master, but he was also a human. He was also a human with fears. He was also a human that had his own contradictions. He was a human like all of us, an ascended master, but a human also. And that part is left out in a lot of teachings of Christianity. But when I went to Glastonbury, I just love, I love how traditions that are thousands of years old, they are kept. No matter how much these power structures try to erase them, the stories are told, and they are told, and they're told, and they're told generation after generation. And this knowledge is retained regardless of if the books are burned, because that's what the Catholic Church did. That's what Christianity did. It went through every place where there were spiritual traditions on the planet. Wherever it touched, it burned things, it burned women, it burned things, it killed people. There was just an enormous amount of destruction, and the destruction was done on purpose to erase the spiritual traditions and the knowledge that were already existent, the very spiritual traditions that Yeshua himself learned from. So, when you really start to see the whole complexity of the story, I want to give a little bit of a detail. There's a cathedral in I think it's in Glastonbury. Yes, it's in Glastonbury. I don't remember the name of the cathedral, but it burned. There's only ruins. And I went to look at it, and it was amazing because on one of the doorways, there is depicted the life of Yeshua throughout the various scenes. It's an early Protestant church, but in Glastonbury. And if you look at the scenes depicting the life of Jesus, there's one interesting image that I took a picture of because I just had to look at it. It was a picture of his birth. He was not depicted as being born in a manger, in, this poor, poor thing. No, he was depicted being born to Mary on top of a 4-post bed. And our guide, when we did that trip, she was really astute because she said, look at this image here. And I was like, I'm looking at it and I'm like, what is this? This is Yeshua's birth scene. Do you see what this is? It's a bed. It's a 4-post bed. 4-post beds at that time only existed to really rich people and royalty. And so it's really interesting that in every corner of the planet, you can find the true story of Yeshua's life. Even in institutions like the church, for example, like they weren't able to bury everything. They weren't able to bury the whole story. And you can find those clues if you just look for them. And so I thought that image of Yeshua's birth, instead of being in a manger with animals, he was born basically in a bed that was fit for a royal. It's very telling to me. But yeah, going back to your question, he traveled a lot and he learned a lot. And that's what made him the master that he was.
And the thing, from my understanding, is that all of these ascended masters are examples of what we can do. That's what they're here to do. They're here to show everybody else that this is possible. And they come in different flavors because not everyone's going to want to follow Buddha or want to follow Jesus or want to follow, Yogananda, or want to follow Babaji, or want to follow, Kwajin, or any of these masters, or Vishnu, or whoever they are. They all have a place in what we're trying to show humanity, to wake humanity up, to understand that the power is within you, to give you the power that, like, No, and Yeshua said it. Everything I can do, you can do and more.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it is, and that is such a powerful statement that if you can get through your own programming and your own stuff that you've been kind of hampered with throughout your life, um,
Yeah.
then you start to awaken in a big, big way.
Absolutely. And I absolutely agree with you. You don't have to, follow Yeshua, or there are so
Mhm.
many different masters on this planet, but they all come with the same fundamental. If you look at all
Mhm.
the ascended masters, the truly ascended masters, not the ones that pretend to be ascended masters, I'm talking about truly pure ascended masters, they all have the same message. They are all living examples of the potential of humans, the potential of consciousness. And they are
Mhm.
all just showing the way. They're leading the path. They're like 10 steps ahead of us, leading us down a path of something that we ourselves can do. And this is the hallmark of great masters. The hallmark of great masters is showing you the potential that you have inside of you, helping you uncover that potential. Right? This is very different from like guru culture or any type
Mhm.
of guru culture where the master exists and then there's all these people below that master and they have to worship the master and cater to the master. This is not guru culture. Ascended masters are not a part of guru culture. They are part of
Right,
a different understanding, right?
right. Yeah, yeah. The
Yeah.
the idea of guru, and I like you that you use the term guru culture, because at least every master that I've studied in that guru line, that he's the guru,
Mm.
um, the true ones all say, "No, child, you
Yeah.
are you. This is what your problem is. This is where you need to adjust. You can get here too." They might be
Yeah.
born with a higher level of abilities than we are. Just like you and I could both play basketball, but neither you or I are Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
There's an
Exactly.
inherent talent that he was born with, but we're all capable of doing the
Yeah.
same motions, but not at the level that he was able to do it at.
Yeah.
And same
Yeah.
thing goes with ascended masters, spiritual masters who are
Yeah.
walking. If you're following someone who is a master, quote unquote, or a guru, and they are the only, you can never achieve what they've achieved, you should probably look into that.
Oh, yeah. And that's really really important, and this is why I like to kind of differentiate between guru culture and true gurus or masters. I don't even like to call them gurus because I think the word has been so distorted, so
Mhm.
distorted. And especially now, talking about all the institutions that are crumbling, guru culture
Mhm.
is crumbling too.
Oh
and
yeah.
and it's because there are many gurus around the world that were never gurus to begin with. They were mostly, not all men, but there's been a lot of men masters that have been falling and have been jailed for sexual predation on their followers, all of kinds of immoral things. And this was happening because they were never true masters to begin with. They were just in that position trying to feed their egos. And so I love the distinction that you're making here. This is very true, and I say this always to my clients and my audience all the time. If you see a master or a guru that is kind of incentivizing dependency on them, that is in any way, shape, or form talking to you as if you were powerless and you can only be saved through them, run the other way. Literally run the other way. Because that's not the type of master that is meant to teach in these energies. That's just
Right.
not the type of, and we've seen this all over the world, from the stories of, John of God being in jail and, Bikram yoga, the whole shenanigans with
Oh,
Bikram and all. I mean, there are example after example after example of really corrupted people that were in power and that just abused their followers. And guess what? All that's coming to the light and all that's being disintegrated because that was not of the light either.
right.
So that is an important distinction to make. There are ascended masters on this planet for sure, but those ascended masters, the true ones, will always be teaching you that you could get that same level. You can go through that evolution. You can walk this path. You can find the kingdom of heaven within you. And so it's a very different talk to the guru culture of, you know, kind of cultivating dependency. And
Right.
that's
Not a
important.
not a
Very, very
Netflix
important.
doc. Yeah, not a Netflix documentary, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah, the other gurus
Exactly.
are Netflix documentaries,
Oh
essentially.
my
It's what
God. Oh my
they're
God.
fascinating to watch. I watch all of them.
They are
But it's
fascinating to watch, but yeah, but it's horrible.
there's yeah, you look at them and you're just like, why didn't you see it? Why didn't you see it? And
Yeah.
I'm not sure about you, but even what I do, there's people who, are starting to put that energy onto me, and I'm sure they do it to you as well. And
Yeah.
I'm the first to go, no, no, no. Mm-mm.
Yep.
That is not what we're doing here.
Yep.
You are the way. You have the responsibility to find your path. If whatever I am doing can help you find your, great, because I'm still on the path
Yeah.
as well. I'm still trying to learn myself. By we're all walking the path. There's no one comes into
Yeah.
this planet perfect.
Yeah.
And we're all learning, even to the day we die. You might be a master, and I use Michael Jordan all the time as an example, but like he was learning to the day he stopped playing basketball about
Yeah.
the game. No matter how amazing he was, no matter how perfect he understood the game, he was still learning because the game changes constantly,
Yeah.
because the game at 23 is a lot different at 37 for him physically. So he
Yeah.
had to change, he had to learn, and it's a
Yeah.
couple things. So,
Yeah.
Christina, I want to ask
And
you a few questions. I ask all my guests.
yeah.
What is your definition of living a fulfilled life?
I think the quickest answer to that is for me, living a fulfilled life is really connecting to that highest path of my soul, living
Mhm.
that highest path of my soul, whatever that is. Whatever that is. Like I'm in that energy of whatever the highest path of my soul is, I will align to that path. Whether that path takes me through pain, whether that path takes me through, twists and turns that the human avatar doesn't want to go on, I'm going to go on that path. And again, I use the example of Yeshua. Like people don't talk about this a lot, but when Yeshua was going towards Jerusalem, he knew exactly what was going to happen to him, and he kept walking. He kept going
Right.
because that was his highest path, and he knew it. Even though he could have doubts, he could have fears, but that was his highest path, and he went towards his destiny. And I want to do the same thing. I don't care where my highest path goes. I just want to make sure that my avatar, that my human self, and that my mind is aligned with that soul and aligned with that highest path, and it just leads me there. That's what I would consider a fulfilling life.
If you had a chance to go back in time and talk to little Christina, what advice would you give her?
I would probably just say to her very, very early that there's nothing wrong with her and
It's
that
all good.
it's all good. There's nothing wrong with her. That she could be free and that she could play and that she doesn't have to take on the responsibilities that she thinks she does. Because I think a lot of us that come from trauma, we take on those adult responsibilities when we're really, really children, and then we assume those responsibilities for the rest of our lives and kind of lose our childhood a little bit. So I would go back and I would say, hey, like I've got this. You can go play. You can go relax. You can go have fun. You can go giggle. You don't need to do adult things. You don't need to take responsibility. You don't need to, like reassure her, take that, like I'm connecting to her now. And there was just a lot of us just have that. Our child selves are so loaded. They're carrying
Mm.
so much weight when they should be free. So I take that weight off and I'd let her go play.
How do you define God or source energy?
I can't really define it. That's so hard. That's such a hard question. Um, it's where I come from. It's who I am. It's at the core of everything. It's everything. It's literally everything and the space between everything.
Fair
Um,
enough.
right?
What is
Like
love?
literally. To me, love and source are the same thing. So
So,
those are synonyms. Yeah,
fair enough.
synonyms.
And what is the ultimate purpose of life?
Oh, this is just such this plane of existence. There's a waiting list to come here because this is a prized way for the soul to evolve. It's a very rare type of reality, being incarnated in physical matter. And so it's very prized by the soul. And so the purpose of life to me is just to come down here and experience life, experience evolution, experience your soul through a different way of evolving, through a different prism. And sometimes it involves pain, and sometimes it involves happiness. It involves complex things, but it's all worth it at the end. It's all worth it at the end. And our purpose to me is only found usually at the end of life when you can look back and you could say, oh, that's why I came down here. I can now see, I can now see, I don't know what it is right now, but I'm going to know when I'm about ready to transition, and I know it's going to be amazing. So for right now, I just, have fun while I'm down here, and I continue to evolve, and I continue to enjoy, and I continue to experience.
Beautiful. And where can people find out more about you and everything and what you're doing in the world?
Yeah. So usually people find me on my YouTube channel. I have a large YouTube channel with hundreds of videos. That's usually where people find me. So you can just look up Christina Lopes on YouTube. You can easily find me. You can also look me up on my website, christinalopes.com. Or christina-lopes.com. You can find me there too. You can find me on social media. I'm working with a lot of clients. I have a private community, so a lot of people reach me also and go into the private community. It's the only place where I do live coaching. So got a lot going on. Retreats, I do retreats also. So once people get introduced to the videos, once they come on the website, they join our email list, they start to kind of, absorb all of the stuff that we're doing. They'll usually either want to join our community or maybe come on a retreat with us. So that's what we've been up to.
And do you have any parting messages for the audience?
I think we had a long conversation, right, Alex? I feel like, I feel like the parting words maybe that I always have for people is, even if you're feeling like life is really challenging or you're feeling unease with all that's happening in the world, just always remember that this is temporary and that there is a new reality emerging on this planet, and that you can choose to be a part of that reality. You can choose to leave behind the drama. You can choose to leave behind the suffering. You can choose to leave that behind and kind of get on a different boat. Right. And everybody has the capacity to do that. And even if you feel like you don't have the tools right now, there's always help available. There's Alex out there with all his videos. You can look me up. There's all my videos. And there's so many people out there who are assisting you to, help you heal your trauma and help you awaken and help you just live a more fulfilling life. So, keep going.
Christina, it's been such a pleasure and honor speaking to you today. Thank you so much for being on the show and for all the work you're doing to awaken the planet. So I appreciate you, my dear.
Thank you so much, Alex. I appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.